Hi everyone, it's Greg Daly here from RPM Technik, and today our guest is Chris Wildsmith, who is the owner of the Snakebite 997 CSR. So if you've seen the latest Carfection video with Henry Catchpole, you'll have seen the vehicle. So morning Chris, how are you?
I'm good, Greg. Yeah. It still seems a bit surreal when I see like Catchpole driving the car and everything else. It's doesn't feel sort of quite right when you see your own car flying around the Welsh mountains and whatever.
Well, your car's been in a few publications. You're not used to it by now?
Yeah, I think the car is a lot more popular than I am. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I remember talking about it after one of the first, I think, magazine articles, and you said someone had wandered up to you in the street and sort of tapped you on the shoulder, sort of thing.
Yeah,
That's probably going
yeah,
to happen a bit more.
yeah. Well, I've also got somebody in the local village, which literally I think is a sum total of 600 people, and yeah, there's a guy there who seems to know snakebite better than I do. So yeah, it has its own following.
Indeed, and I assume you've watched the video. What did you think?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I think we've talked before. I really like Catchpole as a as a sort of a character. I think he's really good at sort of distilling what a car's all about. I think he's kind of up there with the Chris Harris's of car reviews, if you like. So yeah,
Yeah,
I liked it. I think he got across the right kind of messages. I know it's always really difficult with a car that isn't sort of stock and hasn't got the PR sort of blitz that the car companies give it. So yeah, he seemed to like it. I guess he likes 997s, and he's a great
yes,
lover of manuals. So we were on sort of home ground from the start. Really.
yeah. How are you going to deal with the fame?
Probably ask the car that question, not me. Yeah, but it's kind of a. I was thinking about this actually the other day. Is kind of what makes a car right. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I think it's so weird. You guys know much better than I do, but there's certain cars you just look at, and they don't have to be shouty, they don't have to be race cars, they don't have to be sort of, and they just look right. And I don't know why, but always Snakebite's just been like that. And you can go anywhere, and you just get people sort of smiling or double taking or looking at it. And at the end of the day, it's not that unusual in terms of it's not a radical color, it's not doing anything kind of amazing. It's just one of those cars that somehow seems to create its own sort of impression very quickly. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's weird. There are cars like that. You can't really pin it down. Yeah.
No,
Maybe I should have gone for
exactly.
that.
Well,
Should have gone for that plum interior, and then it would have really set everything off. Yeah.
well, we'll come back to that in a sec. So, to sort of start from the beginning, then, how did you get into Porsches and why?
Um, it's it's really weird actually because I actually came up on the dark side, if you like, because I always really liked sort of rally cars, and I grew up in the long and distant era of sort of Mark II Ford Escorts and Welsh, sort of muddy stages and the McRaes going to Subarus and everything like that. So I'd always really liked sort of the rally car come road car and the idea that the old thing of race it on a Sunday, buy it on a Monday. So that was
Yeah.
always my I suppose where my natural passion was. So most of my cars in my early days were always that type of car,
Hmm.
and I had a bit of a almost a negativity towards Porsche. Really, I just felt they were sort of like this posh man's posing car that just threw you off into a hedge. Um, so I'd done that stupid thing of never really sort of finding out whether your bias was correct or not.
Yep.
So yeah, kind of sort of watched them and looked at them and everything else. But it was actually a friend who, a good few years back now, we were just going for a drive, and he bought a white, I think it was a 2S, just standard Carrera. I think a 997, speaking enough, as well. And on the way
Yeah.
back, he just said, "Do you want to drive?" And I was like, "Why would I want to drive this?" It's like it's quite nice. We like the noise, but it's not that special. Yeah. And then 20 minutes later, I was totally smitten. Just couldn't believe how everything just felt so much more connected, just so much more, I suppose, transparent, compared to so many other sort of cars that are sort of driven. And yeah, yeah, a little bit about my history and sort of jobs and stuff like that. So I'm well used to sort of picking up hire cars, driving all sorts of cars. So you do just become very blasé about them. But
Mm.
it's quite unusual, I think, to be able to just step straight into a car and feel like it feels totally right, totally different. And yeah, so it just started from there, really.
Yeah. You probably will be the most travelled human I've ever known, potentially. How many flights did you have last year, Chris?
um, I think there was a point where I think my worst sort of 10 days was 4 flights, including one to Canada and one to Singapore in 10 days. So I did a 2.5-day trip to Singapore and then a 5-day trip to Vancouver. And I think in the middle of it, I managed to squeeze something into Germany and something to, I think it was to Italy as well. So probably in the total year, probably heading towards 60 flights. So yeah.
Which country has the best hire cars then?
I've got a sort of a. I actually perversely like the worst possible hire car you can almost get, really, because then you can just thrash it and kill it, and it's quite amusing. So I think the one I particularly remember was one I picked up in Rome. I had to drive it down to a place, one of our offices right down the sort of south of Italy, and it was the most gutless Renault. I think it was a Megane. I'm not even sure it made a litre. And you literally, if you saw like a lorry on the motorway about 600 yards ahead of you, you literally have to change down almost a third and scream it on the rev limiter just to get it to accelerate past the lorry. But it was almost fun in the end, just to sort of see how much. It was a battle of almost, will this car survive or will I survive?
Luckily, you did for us.
Yeah. But then I'm not sure I should tell you. Well, you don't know, some of this. But then I was in LA, sadly, just before all the lockdown stuff started, and I did Highway 1 on a weekend, and hired a Mustang convertible, which was very cool for the engine noise, and loved that. But that's always a danger of a car like that, because you get bored of it and heading across the mountains. I was merrily trucking along and probably going a little bit too fast, and one of the US highway officers was very kind to stop me and point out the error of my ways and hand me a rather large fine. So sometimes it's good to have the cheaper cars as well.
It's a good anecdote, though. It's worth the fine.
I'll tell you what, the whole day was, when you think of, particularly, it's a good memory from this year so far, and obviously not a lot else is good, but to be driving across the sort of the mountains, 80 degrees sun in January, heading out onto Highway 1 on the coast, for a minor discretion with a very large police vehicle behind you, it definitely felt worth it.
So back onto topic. Sorry, we digress a little. So what was your first Porsche then?
It was, I call it the Sofa, which I suppose comes back to some of the track driving, but it was actually just a good old standard 9914S that I think I eventually sold through you guys.
You did indeed, yeah.
And for a few years that was sufficient. But I guess even in those stages, I'm not very good at compromises. So I did start to get into some of the track driving and started to get a bit more sort of tuition on that side, and just found it more and more. I guess I was brutally getting to the limits of the car, which obviously if you're full on track, you are going to find that in those sorts of cars. So I think the turning point for me was when I took it to a Porsche proper dealer, if that's the right way to say it, and I'd been on track at Goodwood, I think it was, and basically had knackered all discs and pads on all 4 corners, and they were sort of horrified to find out that I'd been on track with it, which sort of told me something was badly wrong, not with the car, but with the attitude of the dealer. So that set me off on a journey which came across you guys.
Well, I was looking through my notes earlier, Chris, and we first met in August 2016, and obviously that wasn't regarding the Snakebite car. That was your other Porsche, which we've supplied and built for you, which is your 981.
Yeah. It's funny in a way, because I always feel like Snakebite's got this instant appeal, and I almost feel like the 981 is a car that gets forgotten because it's only a lowly Cayman, and it's amazing how it sort of seems to bury itself into people's affections. With you a few weeks ago at Silverstone, and it's amazing how many people sort of stop and look at it. And it's probably had more work done to it probably than even Snakebite in terms of turning it into a very sort of dedicated track car. So it's I guess it's like 2 kids. They're very, very different, but I love them for being so different, really.
Well, we should probably put a bit of explanation around what the 981 is, which is it's a Cayman S 2013 manual car, which started life with a cracking spec, to be fair, didn't it? It had bucket seats, manual box, all the sort of driver aids,
Yep.
driver orientated features. And I remember we met in reception, and you were explaining you wanted to do a bit more track work, and I said, "Well, let's get you a GT4." And you stopped me there and said, "No, that's too easy. Why did we go down this route?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny as well because obviously the obvious answer would be to even at that point, would have been to get on the queue for a GT3, or like you said, a GT4s at the time, or just go down the sort of well trodden route. But I suppose there was a few people I'd talked to, and a lot of people were sort of saying, the Cayman, really for only a couple of failings almost, is just a really, really good car. And it's almost, we all know, Porsche's probably been very deliberate about not letting it become the superior car to the 911. But the long gearing was, and it still is, a big problem with it. But I knew that, or I felt that it would be a much more interesting journey to try and, I suppose, almost try and turn it from a sleeper car into something that could actually, be a lot more fun. And I'd love to say, and I know you've sat with me in it, going around the circuits and everything, that I think for me, I find it far more challenging, brutally, if you're on a track in a, whatever you want to, even in a GT2 RS or whatever. I like to think that pretty much anyone who's got the balls can just put their foot on the right pedal, and they're going to enjoy it. But there's a much bigger thrill in a very light car, because of some of the things we've done to it. Actually coming into the braking zone and catching stuff up that you just wouldn't imagine you could catch up. And then it's a hell of a lot more, I guess, skill and balls to get you around that corner, and suddenly find yourself right behind things. Unfortunately, they then do sometimes disappear off into the distance, but it's a bit more of a thrill, I guess, from my side. Yeah.
And we tend to find that there is that movement of people coming out of sort of much faster cars. Ultimately, if you were sort of looking at a Nürburgring lap time, for example, but to driving a car which you can extract maybe in the real world, let's say 80-85% of its performance from it, rather than 15 or 20% of its performance from it, and therefore you're getting more enjoyment from that car, and that's where the Cayman is a hard car to let go, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it was interesting because Tim Harvey was with us. We were actually guests of Tim, weren't we, at Silverstone? And I went round with him in his GT3, which I must admit, actually, I think if you sort of say what is the greatest thing about a Porsche, I can't think of many other cars that you can go around with literally a very highly decorated racing driver, and he can talk you through the whole lap as you're going, chatting away, relatively on the limit of the car, and then you stop and he just opens up the bonnet and realizes that he's left some cake in the front that he takes out, and you can have a piece of cake straight after the pitch. I think, I struggle to think of doing that in an M3 or whatever. But it was interesting because, we were almost talking about it as we were going around, but you never got the sense that car was really, even with Tim Harvey at the wheel, it was very much sorted and planted. The tyre grip is incredible. There's obviously downforce there. There's all the things that, as he needed, was a fantastic drive. But I kind of love the idea of the Cayman, that there are times now where you certainly say Silverstone's a great circuit where you can be, some of the corners there where you can be probably at the end of mechanical grip, and you're sort of into, the tyres really just, all of them just moving. You haven't really got any downforce. There's no inherent downforce in the car. And so you literally do feel like you are pretty much at the edge. And all the time, I think you guys have told me, most of the time it's on circuit, the rev counter is pretty much wrapped around the red end. So it's a great feeling, and because we've stripped out the interior, there's so much more noise. So brutally, you sort of, the sensation is a bit like, you feel like you're in a race car. Whereas even in Tim's car, you could almost do a stig and put the radio on and just be pootling around, enjoying the music in the background.
Yeah, and the way you kind of approach the build of that is the example that I give to a lot of guys and girls when they come and see us, because rather than and if I may say, you could have quite happily from day one just done all the mods and just got on with it, but your logic and thought process was to improve the car as your driving skill improved. So I think the first mod we did was just a set of tires, wasn't it?
I think it was. It was tyres. Well, it might have been brake pads as well because I do tend to go through those. But yeah, it was pretty basic. And then we just went suspension and it is good because I suppose now, particularly with some of the cars that are out there, I think it's really difficult for anyone to know what's their skill or their capability and what's the car
Yeah.
because there's so much stuff going on. And even if you're turning off driver aids or traction control, there's still so much other stuff that's going on in the car that you're not aware of. So every step of the way we've gone, you could literally sort of feel that difference. And particularly the thing that I've appreciated actually the most, bizarrely, is things like the gearing, getting the short gears in there just gives you that so much more urgency. And in some ways, that then forces you to do much more sort of active heel and toe because the ratios are much closer. So you improve your skill in doing that, and then even with the brakes, we put on the AP racing brakes, which are kind of fairly stating the obvious, but racing brakes. And that's probably the hardest skill to learn is when you've got brakes that are so bloody good that you've basically got to go beyond the boundaries of your own brain to think when to brake because it just doesn't feel right. So that stuff to me is far more challenging than it is just booting your right foot and waiting for the acceleration to come.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with that car. There are two sort of standout things that just do it for me, which is the brakes on it are just on a different level, aren't they? What's the
Yeah.
setup we went with them in the end?
Well, the brakes they were just AP Racing. I think they're what were they? Something like 410 calipers on the front, but they're huge. And they just literally just stop the car dead. In fact, I've often said it to you. I'd love to do a 0 to 100 to 0 against a GT3 because I'm sure it would lose out obviously on the top end to the 100. But I bet you it would catch a lot of that back up again, back down to zero, because it does routinely on circuit. And I'd love to tell you it was all my driving skill, but I suspect not. It routinely does catch up GT3s, GT4s into corners, and it just makes. I think I told you last year I actually went to Snetterton, and obviously there you've got a real range of cars. Things from people who've just knocked together in their garage to sort of just average cars that people are just using day to day, and then take it out for a track day. And I was quite a few times in serious trouble almost coming into a corner because I just hadn't realised how much I was going to catch up on a car from braking to mid-corner. And there was so many times where you're right up somebody from being 300-400 yards behind them into the corner. So it is great for that. I love it.
Well, going on to the car of the moment then. So the 997 CSR, the Snakebite. So why did you build it? How did that come about?
I suppose probably what I said earlier. I always remember one thing that you guys, you do sort of talk about it a lot is and it, for a lot of people, the idea of having a good car, well set up, mainly road driving, and then maybe the odd track day or the odd sort of aggressive day. But I'm not very good at sort of compromises, I suppose. So for me, I felt like there wasn't really a car out there that had that driver pleasure at the centre of it all. And I think possibly the only cars that Porsche have even tried to do that recently, probably the R, but it's crazy for all sorts of reasons. And then probably the lightweight cars, which in the end turned out to be a little bit like McLaren's Longtails, 1 millimetre longer, and somehow gets a name to it. So it was really about trying to get that driver enjoyment back in without going sort of completely hardcore, without trying to do that. And I suppose also just an opportunity to do things that I felt were interesting, rather than just have to accept what a dealer tells you is on the tick list. I knew, and by then, obviously, I totally sort of believed that you guys were either mad enough or sane enough, depending on which way around you view it, to sort of go on that journey as well. It's probably different days feels like different answers. It was just that. Yeah, and I always wanted to do road trips. I think I told you, my still yet to be achieved, but I definitely want to. Take that car to the North Pole, or at least as far as into the Arctic Circle as I can get. I want to take it across Europe. Last year we actually went up to the North 500 up in Scotland. We were due to go to Ireland in it this year. So it's really sort of using it as that sort of a bit of a sort of a car that you remember lots of great journeys with it.
Yeah, and It's I've got a couple of questions here, which may be a little bit contentious, but from the trepidation, that were some comments on the Carfection video, and I thought it's an interesting point to discuss. So the first one is, why wouldn't you buy a GT3 or a GTS instead?
Um, I think the GT3 one is I suppose ultimately that to me still feels like a compromise. You are still in a car that really should be out on track. Um, I guess there's also an element of money to it that
Hmm.
uh, ultimately people feel they can't drive a GT3. Yeah, they're almost trying to keep it as a sort of a below whatever 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 miles. So you get very sort of hooked up on the fact that it's a prestige car. Whereas I've always just loved driving cars. So for me, if you're not driving it, what's the point in owning it?
Yeah.
So those things sort of put me off. And I guess, yeah, GTS, all those sorts of cars. Yeah, I suppose it's just you are in the end you're still restricted. You still have to follow the Porsche mantra. Yeah, I love the base of what Porsche is, but I still always feel like I can just give it an extra twist that makes it different. So
Mm.
um, yeah, it's just all, and then it's the detail, isn't it? And I think this is what I love is talking to you guys, understanding what other little bits can be made or done differently or achieved, and that just sets it on another level completely. Yeah, compared to still the right side of the money that you would spend on a GT3 or whatever, you've still achieved something that's very very different. And we all know, frankly, a GT3 on the public roads is a little bit like you said earlier. Ultimately, you're a bit frustrated because you're sort of you're not really sort of able to get the most out of the car.
Mm.
Yeah, you're just pootling along almost. So yeah, car that's a little bit more playful. Yeah, it's just got that really delicate setup. Yeah, and I think Catchpole video sort of showed that. That it's a car that you can just get. I'm not sure anyone could really get a GT3 slightly sort of off track on a public road unless it was tipping down with rain and 1 degree.
Yeah, or you're very brave.
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly.
But we should probably talk about spec actually, because obviously with the CSRs, we've been building them for 10 years now. So when it came down to the mechanical side of things, clearly we've kind of got that button down. But what's really captured people's interest and attention on your car is the interior and the color combination, which, let's be honest, we can't give you all the credit for that, can we, Chris?
No, not at all. No, I think my unusually probably for a car, my wife became very animated at that point, and she is a interior designer, more traditionally of sort of houses and offices. So yeah, she started to sort of get involved. But I do remember a day, and I think this is probably the only. I wouldn't say it's a word of warning, but I would say it's just kind of a reality check that I can remember me and Ollie sitting in the car as it originally was. And I talked about some stupid ideas and stupid colours and all the rest of it. And we sat in the car, and then you just started looking around the car. And I suppose, probably like everyone, you never really think about the interior of a car until you've got
Mm,
to think about the interior of the car. So suddenly, all the things that was just because you're looking in one direction, then you think, oh shit, there's stuff behind us and there's things on the side, and actually there's a line that follows all the way around the car that clearly, car designers have been thinking about for a long time, and we've
yeah.
just been thinking about what could you do on this part or that part. So it really did become at some points really hard work. But yeah, I think the combination of one of the guys that you use to do the interiors, from a sort of fitting point of view, and then a lot of different people sort of helping out with different ideas. It sort of did gradually come together, but I have to admit that was probably the one point where I was thinking, oh my god, have I chewed off too much this time? Is this just going to look like a load of fabric draped everywhere? And but yeah, I guess ultimately Nicola's design sense won through, which was definitely a relief.
Where did it change tack from having the oxblood interior? Because I remember talking about that with you. I still maintain that would look cool, but when I lost track of
Yeah,
what point that went down.
yeah, it was. I guess it sort of was what that whole problem of where do you stop, because I don't think it was ever the intention that everything would sort of almost go that colour, because then it'd just be I think probably too much. Yeah, I've never liked cars that
It'd
sort of
be a
look
bit
like that.
bold, Chris. That would have been.
Yeah, yeah. So it was always going to be sort of like flashes of or panels of or that sort of thing. And then you just realised there were so many things that just became problems. Yeah, like you were fighting with, I can't remember now, but yeah, sort of like seat post pillars or something that were just you think you can't go and start replacing colours on that. And so it just started to become a headache. And then I think I was talking to Nicola about it one time, and she was saying, well, she always kind of tries to understand the sort of heritage of stuff, I suppose, and where's everything come from. So she's saying, well, show me a picture of a Porsche that's got Oxblood red interior. I was like, well, there isn't one. And then she was just looking at a few pictures I picked out, and she started then using the houndstooth. She said that's really interesting, and yeah, if you can combine that with other things. So I think then that just became a more subtle variation. The houndstooth, obviously with Porsche history, it's more compatible with matching to other things. And then it just became, sort of just really subtle things like Alcantara. The fact that it doesn't actually shine. So when the sun's shining, you get less reflection from it. And it's little things like that you don't really notice. But now it's actually all together in the car. It's one of the, probably this sounds stupid, it's one of the best things I like about driving it is that you just don't get that shine from any of the kind of top panel. And the Momo wheel and everything just feels so much more tactile. It really did come together. But I guess it made me appreciate how much time you guys have put into the sort of the mechanical side, because that's probably even worse. But yeah, I can certainly relate to it in terms of how hard it is to put an interior together.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, the next interesting point I'd written down here to talk about was value, and
Yeah,
it's a very interesting topic because you've got a lot of different dynamics to sort of evaluate in the current climate of 2019. Collector car values generally came down, so I know you've never bought cars for an investment point of view, and if you were going to invest in something, again, you'd probably be putting your money somewhere very different from something with
yeah,
four wheels on it. But
yeah.
man maths, how did you sort of logic it yourself, and again, future values? Because no one wants to put all their money into a car that's worth nothing, which obviously wouldn't happen, but it's not going to have the same return as if you'd have put it into I don't know, £100,000 classic car. So what was your sort of thought process on that subject?
First thing is exactly as you said, and I think it goes for the 981 as well, because again, you could argue there's better ways to spend the money. Although I'd argue probably in both cases, I don't think either of them are necessarily bad investments in that sense. I just don't think they'll ever quite. Yeah, they're not going to do stellar returns. But then I look at cars. In fact, I was at I think it was at the World Endurance at Silverstone last year, and they always have all the, I think the Porsche GB Club let people park in the infield, and there was a whole range of cars there, a lot of probably every different Porsche model known to man. And I was just walking down and looking along all the cars, and unless they have all just been for a respray on their fronts in the last sort of month, it was just incredible how none of them had any marks on the the bumpers or anything. No stone chips, no nothing. And I was just
Yeah.
thinking, what's the point of owning these things if you literally haven't got some stone chips? And I mean the 981 particularly. I mean the 981 has got some proper battle scars on it, and I really love that. Yeah, because that's what it's about.
I think it gets an annual clean, that car, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's a proper. It feels designed for its purpose, and I suppose the same with Snakebite. I just love the idea that its main purpose is to drive, and that is going to mean that you get the odd little chip and mark and everything else, and it just then becomes a lot more real. So I suppose to keep it on value, I I didn't want to become a part of that club where you're more worried about its inherent value, and like you say, you're sort of driving something around that you're almost wanting to sell in a year's time, and that's making you feel careful about it.
Mm.
Obviously, if I ever did want to sell it, I'd hope I got some sort of return, but I probably know that if I did that return to my value that I've got from it, it will always be a fantastic investment. And sort of, I suppose at the end of the day, every time you start a car up, that you get the pleasure from it.
Yeah.
To me, that just adds incrementally. Whereas if you, um, yeah, I don't know. I've just seen, I know talking to you, sort of when you get people who are sort of so scared to almost drive the cars and drive it properly, not just sort of poodle along in it.
Yeah.
It just becomes to me, it sort of compromises the enjoyment. So I don't know if that's a
And
good
I
answer,
think,
but I think,
yeah, no, I think it's true. And I think in normal times, inverted commas, I think people might sort of, turn their nose up and sort of say, oh, it's a bit of a cheesy answer saying, the value is in the experience. But I think in the last 2 months, 3 months, with obviously the crisis and everything that's going on at the moment, actually people will put more emphasis on that because of, we've all been locked up. We can't be driving cars around in the same way that
yeah,
we've been used to. And
yeah.
so actually that value of using the car, I just think will go through the roof. And I hope, and I think we'll see people putting more miles on some of these cars and probably using the same sort of logic that you've just explained there.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, I get people who want to collect, yeah,
Hmm.
and that's whole different desire. And if that's what they want to do, and they want to collect them and just enjoy them for almost like static art, then so be it. I think where it's gone wrong in the last 10 years is where they've become sort of um, almost people wanted both. Almost they wanted to almost have them as art and beauty, and I suppose almost like the flipper. Yeah, and it became a thing where you could buy a car that really had been designed for one purpose, and then sort of make money on it, and then obviously all the dealerships got into the game of how many cars you have to buy from them, and it just became a really bizarre game.
Mm.
And I think you're right. I think the other problem change after all this is obviously I think asset prices in general are going to be are going to be stretched for a good few years. So I think if it brings back driving a pure enjoyment, fantastic. I'm all for that.
No, definitely. Well, I mean, on the subject of pounds and pence, some of the practicalities, insurance. How have you found insuring both of the cars?
Um, try and try and say something sensible. I suppose no worse than any normal car, to be honest. But
Yeah,
you do sometimes just have to do a little bit of work, because there are some insurance companies out there. The minute you mention modified or any other sort of words like that, they go completely sort of ape and treble the premium. But I'd say, well, to give you a comparison, I've got two other, if you like, boring cars: a BMW 2 litre diesel and my wife's got a Mercedes convertible, and neither of them are, are that much more. Um, I think both of them end up being around, probably 30%, 40% more than those two cars, and those two cars are very normal, average, ploddable cars. So yeah, the 981 is probably the more tricky one, but that probably becomes more about when you start talking to people and saying, I don't know, 12, 15 track days a year, frequently at sort of places like Millbrook and Buntingthorpe. And they start to realise that really it's a track car and nothing else. I think that
yeah.
just gets it more and more specialist. But yes, in fact, if anything, I think Snakebite actually insured with Classic Line, and did they get a free plug? And and they were actually sort of almost more interested because it was something a bit unique and different, and that's the
Yeah.
sort of stuff they like. So, and I think they know by nature then that the more people care about the car, probably it's going to be looked after, kept in a garage, all the things that they like anyway. So, and as you know, the tracker on that car is so bloody good that I know where it
See,
is at all
tell you
times,
what,
night and
actually,
day.
that is worthy of a couple of minute conversation. The tracker on Chris's car is one of the most advanced trackers I've ever experienced. So it will record brake pressure,
Yep,
throttle position,
yep. Cornering.
RPM, fuel
Yeah,
economy, and then it
yeah,
even gives you a score of your drive at the end,
yeah,
of
yeah.
which you
Which
have
which
a
we've
slightly
abused the wrong
upside
way
down
around.
version of.
Yeah. But yeah,
I
I mean,
feel
there's a.
guilty every time I drive that car.
But yeah, it was very sad. Somebody who'd watched the Catchpole video actually said, "Oh, yeah, I thought he did all his his videoing sort of. I can't remember who said Scottish borders or whatever." And I said, "No, it's actually the B1372 just outside sort of Swansea or wherever it was, because it literally will give you a map of where they've been driving." So it's very useful for obviously when it's not in your possession, but sometimes like
Definitely.
you, I worry a little bit about how much it can tell you. But I guess
No,
it's probably
exactly.
sadly the future of cars. With was it 2021, 2022 regs where they're going to bring in sort of like black box stuff. I guess that's going to be true for every car.
No, exactly. But and so again, some of the realities of building these types of cars, which obviously are heavily modified. Some of the realities of them are that once you've built it, there is a certain amount of snagging involved once they've been built. A bit like when you built a house.
Yep.
And obviously, we always sort of lead people into these builds with their eyes open, and it's kind of a two-way thing, isn't it? Once the car's built, you give us some feedback, and then there's some bits we improve because certain items on your car were prototype items, weren't they?
Yeah, well, and on both cars as well, actually. But yeah, I mean, the Snakebite, you said it well there with was comparing it to a house. I think most people's assumptions is that a new house and a new car means that you drive it away and you never have to talk to the dealer again for 3 years. Actually, I think this BM that I've had now for almost 2 years, 5 Series Boring Estate, is probably the first car that I've ever had that's actually turned out like that. It's amazing how many other ones, even if they're a year or 2 years old, you end up sort of trotting back to the dealer in 2 weeks' time saying, this doesn't seem to work, or why does that not work, or so I think the reality of new isn't always quite as clean as people think it is. But I think then when you're right, when you're into restoration, I think it's more about appreciating the reality of the journey, the fact that you get a lot more closer to understanding how things really work.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, if people just want to be able to get in a car, turn the ignition and just drive and turn the stereo on and not even think about anything, then maybe it's not the right car. But if you really want to sort of get back into the world of understanding a little bit about what's going on, how it all fits together, what decisions are to be made. I think it's so much more interesting. It turns it into a bit more of a journey or an experience rather than just, well, sorry, mate, that's how it is. And yeah, sort of whether it's set up, learning how the car is, diffs we put on the car. There's so many bits that you sort of think, you've learned something from that as well as kind of what it did mechanically. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of positives to that. I mean, if it was your daily run around and you needed it come what may, then that's obviously a different decision. But I'd equally say, touch wood. Luckily, I'm on a wood desk, so I'm fine. I don't think a Snakebite has never let me down. So it's all the fine tuning really.
Yeah, and so a couple of last topics of conversation. Then you've kind of got your modern track car, modern classic, I suppose, effectively, like Henry was talking about. Would you go and get a classic? Would you get a classic car?
God,
doesn't have to be Porsche, Chris.
the infinite garage question. But because I think actually, and this might be an interesting thing, and I think there's almost like two issues that are sort of coming together that one might go in its favour, one might go against it. Is that I love things like the AC Cobras and some of the sort of more almost open air cars, if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah.
But then equally, the more and more sort of environmental we're going, you can see those cars becoming problems in not too far down the line. But for me, the sort of I'm actually less interested in the sort of the let's say air cooled Porsche or something like that. I think if I was going to go for something, it'd be almost back to that 50s motor racing era, where they were just nutters basically and just trying to die quickly. And I think that would be the kind of type of car that I'd be more interested in, because I think again, sometimes I'll admit that I drive my wife's Mercedes convertible with the roof down just because it's slightly more thrilling, but it's got nothing to do with the speed because it goes like a plodder. But it's just because there's air around you and it just feels quicker.
Yes, it's the sensation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, one last one then, racing. Would you or wouldn't you?
It is a really, really difficult one. There's so many. God, you shouldn't have asked this as the last question. We could still be going for an hour. But I suppose the really quick things. I know it's in my kind of blood. I'm sure I've told you before, but my uncle many years ago used to race at the TT over in the Isle of Man, And one of my first memories is he actually emigrated to New Zealand. But I remember him literally bringing his race bikes to his parents' house, and he wanted them to look after him while he sold them. So I just always have this memory as like a 3 or 4-year-old seeing these incredible race bikes, even of that era. So I know there's something in there like that that's kind of hardwired into me. And I've been very lucky through my life that I've also been fairly seriously competitive in a couple of sports along the way. But also I know both of those times in the end, you sort of start to fall out of love with it because it becomes so serious and so
you get too into
so
it.
focused on what you do, and you spend so much time on it and all the rest of it. And like you say, I travel a lot with my job and everything else. So I kind of, at the moment, I feel like the 981 is almost my substitute race car almost. And I'll freely admit, of course, you never ever race or try to be competitive on a track day, but there is a buzz when I'm particularly somewhere like Snetterton, where I think that car is perfect because there's so much sort of twists and turns on that circuit, and very often when you're there, the cars are probably of a more comparable sort of power ratio. So yeah, it's great to be sort of pushing your way through the field and whatever. Whereas, but then on the other side of the fence, I'm a bit of a masochist, and I like being at Silverstone out with some of the RMA stuff that is brutally race cars, just to see if you can try and keep up with a Ferrari race car for half a lap. So it's a tough question. It is a really, really tough question, and you then just realise it's just another level. And see when you bring in the GT cars and stuff like that, and it's a fascinating world when you see it, but it's just that extra level of commitment that I think I've seen it so many times in other things that I used to do. I remember I used to be pretty good at cycling, and the amount of hours I used to spend training and doing stuff, and you just it's a slippery slope. I can vouch for it twice in my life where you just don't realise how much time you're spending on something. So if there's
Maybe
a
a
way you
gentleman racer then.
yeah, exactly, almost like a gentleman racer. Yeah, turn up and but then I'm also as you can tell with both cars, I kind of believe in understanding what's going on, the setup and everything else. So I'm not sure I could ever be one of those people who just turned up and grabbed the keys and jumped in. I kind of always want to know what's going on. So yeah, it's a bit of a crap answer, but
it's a watch this space. We'll do one of these in 12 months' time and see what's happened. But
well, I have to admit, again, it's amazing how much this year just feels like it's sort of things you have memories of now that just feel like they're like 5 years ago. But I went to watch some of the circuit rally stuff at Brands very early January, and anyone who's not aware, but more and more obviously traditional rallies are becoming harder and harder to do through forests and all the rest of it. So they've started to use some of the circuits, and they mix it up. So they use a little bit of the circuit, even some of the pit lanes, some of the normal sort of car park areas, and then they've quite a few of the UK circuits have got rally schools close by, so they then dip off into a bit of a rally stage as well. And there was about 90 cars there, and it's very sort of accessible. And admittedly, the first 3 or 4 cars were almost like WRC spec, absolute monsters, and really impressive. But I did find myself, by the time car number 40 was coming round, and as they're coming sort of to a fairly sharp corner and then sort of losing it a little bit, and I caught myself thinking, I'm pretty sure I could probably do that all better.
Yeah.
And then when you started to see some of the cars that people were coming around in, and people literally sort of looked like 10-year-old Fiestas with just a bit of a roll bar and a few sort of engine mods, it looked a lot more accessible. So that did feel tempting, but even that could just become a slippery world. You'll soon be on Race Cars Direct looking at WRC cars, I suspect.
Expect some emails on your inbox shortly then. But well, listen, Chris, that's awesome. Thank you very much for your time. I know you're an exceptionally busy man who runs multiple businesses these days, and also obviously thank you to everyone who's listened. It's obviously a bit of a strange time at the moment. We're all going through, and big thanks to the NHS and all the key workers for looking after us all. It's big important work. So I have to add, Chris and I, and with a few of these podcasts we've been doing, we've been recording them remotely. So the sound quality isn't quite as good as normal where we're face to face. You have to give us a break on that. But thank you very much, Chris. And we'll no doubt speak to you soon. Take care, mate.
Yeah, no problem. No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.